if I stay in the sauna for 30 minutes, first 15 is pretty chill, right? The last, that next 10 is pretty hard. That last 5, I'm like standing up, I'm sitting down, I'm turning around, I'm turning on the little fan, I'm turning off the little fan, I'm turning on the light, I'm turning off the light. My hands are in my head, right? I got my book, I've closed the book, like wipe my face, close my face, stand up. Like, it sucks. It's a mental battle to stay in.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Aux, and if you're listening to this or watching this, then you are on the public feed. This means you aren't getting 2 bonus episodes per month of The Aux on topics like Bruce Lee, the COVID lab leak theory, Bitcoin, and more. You also aren't getting the full video versions of my other show, the Auxoro podcast, where I sit down with athletes, creatives, scientists, and others to discuss the cool work that they do. In exchange for your hard-earned money or inherited money, we take both, no discrimination here. You'll get 2 bonus episodes of The Aux per month, which ends up being 3+ hours of premium content, the full video of every episode of the Auxoro podcast so you don't have to watch a thumbnail on YouTube, subscriber-only solo episodes, raw notes and research, bonus writings, access to all premium archived episodes, and more. Become a premium member today by going to auxoro.supercast.tech so you don't have to hear any more of these annoying ass pitches now or in the middle of an episode. And trust me, they only get more annoying. Pitches are for bitches. Go to auxoro.supercast.tech today to become a premium subscriber and support quality content from independent creators. The link can also be found in the episode notes. I love you guys and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Aux. I am here with my friend and holistic health coach and story worker, Dave Robinson. What the fuck is up, Dave?
What the fuck is up? Excited to be here. We got a fun topic today.
We do. We have hot and cold exposure. So we have a double whammy today. And I thought a good way to start out would be head in a similar fashion as last time. So if you're listening to or watching this right now, the UFO episode with Dave is already out. That was the first one as part of the series that we're doing. And we kind of got into the background of what we knew about UFOs coming into it before we even got into the technical aspects. So for you, Dave, before I get into it myself, I'll ask you, what drew you to hot and cold exposure and a desire in general to induce stress in the form of temperature to make that a part of your life for long-term benefits?
Great question. Right out the gate, per usual. I read a book in 2015 or 2016 by Scott Carney, I believe, What Doesn't Kill Us or What Does Not Kill Us, something along those lines. And it was a deep dive into really this topic. It's the things that we as humans adapt to over time and how stressors, these little stressors, many stressors, helped to create a more strong, vital, harder to kill, right, human being. And ultimately, I was interested in the sauna. I kind of got into the sauna by chance. The gym I joined in 2015 with a couple buddies I was working out with at the time had a sauna, and it was part of our morning routine. You get the lift in, pop in the sauna for 10, 15 minutes, get a sweat, get a shower, change, go to work, right? And that was a nice little routine a couple days a week, but it started to feel good. And in the beginning, it was super hot, and then it got to a point where you could sit in there for like 30 minutes, and there's always an old dude or old woman in the sauna who is just immune to heat. And they're in there in some tiny towel, and they've been in there for an hour, and you're in there for 30 minutes, and they're still in there, and it doesn't even look like they're sweating, or they're just drenched in sweat and just taking it, right? And it's that, it's the adaptation that got me curious. It's like, man, how can we adapt to this? How can people withstand cold? How can people withstand these long distances that they run or exercise? Or how can people withstand this amazing, or crazy heat, right? And ultimately, those things drew me to starting to experiment with hot and cold. And, here we are with a sauna and a hot tub and a cold freezer all in the spot because it's great.
It's not a sauna if there's not balls and breasts of wisdom just full of wrinkles out and about, just showcased to the world. That is a mainstay in any sauna. And I'm learning how you mentioned being with other people in the sauna and kind of starting out in what sounds like a social environment where you were seeking to kind of heat up with friends and other strangers going in and out of the sauna that just happened to be there. I'm learning how much of a social environment it can be, especially since I'm in the Netherlands right now. I'm recording this in Maastricht, and I just got finished with an experience at this place called Therme 2000. It's like a sauna oasis, and I'll get into more details about that later. But it started out in a similar way for me, where I was down at school at University of Richmond, had been in a sauna maybe once or twice as a teenager, just going on vacations with the family, went in, stayed in for 5 minutes, went back out, didn't think anything about it. And so I was in the Weinstein Center, the Health and Fitness Center at University of Richmond, which you know very well also. And I was experiencing the normal stresses of being a student athlete that, hundreds of other people at the school were also dealing with. And I started going into the sauna at nights. I started studying and being in the actual fitness center. So there were a bunch of these study rooms attached to the fitness center. And I would find myself taking breaks, going to the sauna, cold shower in the locker room adjacent to it, drying off, going back out, and doing that every few hours, especially around finals week, if it was just an absolute grind where you knew your entire day was like 12 to 16 hours of just doing these mental, kind of mental sprints of trying to learn shit at the last second that you're supposed to be doing in a marathon fashion throughout the semester. But I chose the sprint in the last week.
As most of us do. Yeah, many of us do.
Yeah. I started using the sauna without knowing the specific benefits. I knew it was good for me. I knew it felt good for me. I had read some of the headlines of the literature. I did not know any of the actual details, and my body and mind realized these breaks in some way where I would go in the sauna and I would feel good, and it would allow me to study more. It would allow me to sleep better with my eyes having just stared at a screen for 12 hours. And that was my first introduction, kind of the sophomore year, around that area, maybe a little towards the end of freshman year, but sophomore year, really making the sauna a regular part of my studying routine. It wasn't even so much for baseball at that point, because I played baseball at Richmond as well, but it was more just to kind of like get my mind to be able to refocus with the sauna, to kind of relax, the cold shower to sharpen it up, and get back into the room, go for another 3-4 hours, and go eat and do the sauna again. So my introduction was also kind of in the social fashion / educational fashion, because I would go in with a bunch of other guys, probably 3 or 4 other guys in the study hall. We would go down to the sauna, take a break, go back to work. And years later, I find myself looking into the details of why it's actually beneficial to you and knowing the reasons behind it, which we're going to get into today in great detail.
Hell yeah. And, that contrast between the hot, cold, and, how you felt, I imagine you felt more awake. Imagine you felt more like energized, vitalized, alive, right? That's something that is accessible, right? Pretty much at any time to us. You can go into take a shower, take a normal shower, flip it to cold. And if you're in Houston during the summer, it's not going to work nearly as well as if you're in New York in the winter, right? Like where you are matters, but largely you're going to be able to get a contrast, and that's a quick, easy intro into this type of stuff for people. And I imagine we'll get into some tips and tricks at some point as well, but that contrast and that feeling of vitality and clearness and like aliveness, I felt that in Iceland. I don't know, did you do any hot, cold experiences in Iceland?
I went into the natural hot springs in Iceland.
Nice.
I was there about 2 years ago.
Awesome. I was there 4 or 5 years ago. I did the same thing. There was a spot with a name that's like, it's on the southern coast of Iceland, and it's probably 26 letters long, right? Is this name? And
with a bunch of dots overused. And
exactly. Shellbergalag or something like that, right? Sorry to everyone.
Sounds right.
Icelandics. Yeah, exactly. But they had this one of the oldest natural hot spring baths, right? So they've got a geothermal kind of tub that they've made a little pool there, and then there's a stream that runs right in front of it. And you can see that the water from the stream is coming off of like ice cap melts, like in this little valley. It's this little like valley that you kind of like walk up into about a mile, and then you're maybe a quarter of the way up, and then that's where this pool is. And I did the hot cold back and forth, and the water couldn't have been more than 33, 34 degrees. I mean, like the sides of the stream on both sides are ice. There's ice on the rocks. The water's flowing in the middle. I found a little pool section. It wasn't like that fast or that deep. So I was able to get in, and I dunked my head. And going under that, man, is like, it's the difference between getting in like to your waist, first of all, getting your feet in, and then getting your balls in, right? Like when you get your private bits in, regardless of what those private bits may be, right? Like that's some serious, like that's a threshold, right? But then it's the head, right? The head becomes more like primal, because now that becomes into like evolutionarily, there's an oh fuck button that gets hit if your head dunks under icy water, right? You get your forehead on it, like it hurts. But then being able to go back there into the hot, right? And then doing that a couple times, bro, when I walked out, like that hike down, my eyes were like this, like wide open. I was hearing all kinds of sounds. I was alive, like to a T. There was something going on that made I was firing, right? And that was a real visceral, oh shit moment of like, this is powerful. Like I felt the power of hot and cold in that moment.
And you did just above freezing, right? You said it was 33, 34, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Which is fucking cold. Wild. I don't know if I've ever been in an ice bath that was right at the line of freezing. And from my own experiences of being in ice baths, or even just cold showers to a less extreme, knowing how sharply that hits you, and to be in a just above freezing ice bath in the middle of nature, like you said, it hits that kind of oh fuck reflex, but then you're also in Iceland and you're surrounded by grass, and if it's anything like the spot I was at, there's bunch of goats and shit walking around, and it's incredibly green, and you get out and you, like you said, you feel sounds that stand out to me too. You mentioned hearing sounds that, even though I've never done anything that cold, I have had the experience of it's not a ringing, but it feels like my sense of sound and my sense of hearing is being heightened in some way, where I'm just picking up more things that I normally wouldn't pick up, or I'm noticing things that I normally wouldn't notice, and that extends to other senses beyond sound. But I really felt that when you mentioned sound, because that's also an experience that I've had as well.
I think for me, what it's doing is it's clearing out the mind chatter and the static, right? It's making me very present. Right? Like super present. I mean, talk about like be here now, right? like here, and tuned into body and tuned into senses, right? Because think about, from an evolutionary standpoint, like I fall in the creek, right? I need to everything has to be working. Like I need everything turned on in order to get out of that situation alive, and I could see a survival scenario or something where like you got to have your hearing on point. You got to have your, be able to smell like, okay, the campfire's this way, I got to go this way, right? And just you got to have it tuned in, I guess. I don't know, but there's a reason for that. There's definitely
that's probably what attracted me to the saunas back in school. Similar to, putting yourself in a ready alert state when you're cold, I was chasing that desirable state of feeling at ease and relaxed amidst one of the most stressful weeks of the year, which is finals week. And I knew that after the sauna, I was in a state that would allow me to sleep or allow me to go back and do some work if I wanted to. And so even though I didn't know the reasons behind that state, I felt it, and I felt the way my body and mind were connected, and the energy, just the overall energy of my body would change into either a more relaxed with heat and sauna, or a more sharper, alert state with cold. And so the desired state is what I imagine attracted me to saunas, and eventually the ice baths as well.
100%.
So I think a good way to split this up would be to go into heat first, and then we can do cold. And before that, we can give an introduction to Hormesis and the reason why, kind of the foundation, why heat and cold do the things that they do to our body, and the underlying mechanism of that is hormesis. And so this is the definition of hormesis from Science Direct. It says hormesis is defined as a phenomenon in which a harmful substance gives stimulating and beneficial effects to living organisms when the quantity of the harmful substance is small. So in the context of heat exposure and cold exposure, heat and cold would be things that would eventually kill you or be bad. It would not be in a desired state if it continued for a very long period of time, much longer than, the 4 or 5 minute ice baths, 10-minute ice baths, or the 20, 30 hour long sauna sessions. Like, if that continued, it would be something that is quote unquote a harmful substance. But when you apply it in doses, you can harness the frequency of those doses and the duration of the individual doses to have these short-term effects that are beneficial, but also over the long term doing things like decreasing the risk of cardiovascular disease or repairing DNA, things like that we'll get into.
Yeah, and hormesis is the same concept when it comes to, anything that one adapts to, right? Stresses in general, right? First day on a job, you work at the first double you work at the restaurant, right? Back in high school or whatever, right? Like, that sucked for sure. And doubles typically don't ever really feel great, but you get used to them if you're banging them, just like finals week. Like, by senior year, you know what to expect during finals week. Freshman year, that hits you like a ton of bricks in a train, and so it's stresses over time the body adapts to. And ultimately the key here is its duration, its intensity, its volume. All those things matter, just like in an exercise program. But if I sit in that ice bath like that, the tub I have outside is at about 38, 39 degrees, right? And I can only get it about like sternum high, and if I 7 cubic feet, right? So it's not huge, right? But I can sit down. It's sternum high. If I turn sideways, I can kind of get down into my neck a little bit, and that's it. Like, ideally, it's a little bigger, right? I'm in there for 5 minutes. If I had a 0 on the end of that, I'm dead. Yeah. Right. Like, for real, you know, like most likely dead. Right now, obviously I can like get out, but if I fall in the ocean in a 38 degrees and I'm in there for 50 minutes, like I'm most likely not going to be alive anymore. And same with the sauna. If it's 150 degrees, your body can only take that for so long. The human body is only designed to be able to withstand that for so long. And yet in those micro scenarios, in those time frames, those smaller time frames, in those shorter doses, right, the body is going to adapt to that stress to be more adept at handling that stress in the future. It thinks, oh, well, okay, well, now we live in the desert, better get used to this heat. Or, oh, well, I mean, it's pretty dangerous out here getting water every day, like, got to get used to the cold, right? And the body has specific adaptations to both heat and cold and exercise. And, there's arguments that certain vegetables and plants offer benefits through hormesis and like, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah, whenever I think about adapting to stress, my mind goes back to baseball, and I think about the periods where you get back into throwing every day as a pitcher when you had just taken a hiatus from throwing, whether it's over winter break or taking some time off over the summer. and your external rotation, the amount that your arm can rotate along its axis when you first start throwing is just not there. And so that's why you have on-ramping programs for baseball. You're getting your alignment back, your mobility back, your strength back, which hopefully you've been doing some work when you haven't been throwing so that it's a more seamless transition. But I've always been amazed at how quickly, when my arm felt like I was just not where I needed it to be, how quickly my arm would start to adapt to throwing daily. And then all of a sudden, I feel like my arm's sitting back a few degrees more. Then I go out to throw the next day and it feels like it's sitting even more back. And then that whip returns. And maybe after a couple weeks, your body has adapted to the point where it's where it needs to be to throw a baseball. It doesn't need to go any further. And that happened over a few week process. And so when I was reading about saunas and adaptations, it made me think about the physical fitness approaches to baseball, where you introduce your body to a concept, or you introduce your body to an exercise, and then over a period of time, your body gets used to that exercise. Then you add a little bit more, you add a little bit more weight, you add a little bit more range of mobility. You stay a few more minutes in the sauna, stay a few more minutes in the cold tub, and then your body has these built-in hardwired mechanisms that allow you to build resilience and don't kill you. You'd think if you keep adding things over time that could be harmful to you in small amounts, why does our body become more resilient when we dial down those amounts and put our bodies through those things in longer frequencies? And yeah, it's amazing what our body can do. I was amazed at some of the things I learned our body could do preparing for this episode, just reading about how overall resilience increases when you use the sauna and ice bath properly.
Yeah, and there's the physiological adaptions that occur, and there's also the mental benefits that you get, not only when we're talking, just like we did in the beginning of the episode, with clarity and vitality and feeling alive and senses, but it's a hard thing. And there's almost always a benefit in doing a hard thing, coming out the other side and knowing you can do it. It's like, if I stay in the sauna for 30 minutes, first 15 is pretty chill, right? The last, that next 10 is pretty hard. That last 5, I'm like standing up, I'm sitting down, I'm turning around, I'm turning on the little fan, I'm turning off the little fan, I'm turning on the light, I'm turning off the light. My hands are in my head, right? I got my book, I've closed the book, like wipe my face, close my face, stand up. Like, it sucks. It's a mental battle to stay in, and then maybe can you push it a little longer, right? Go 32 minutes, right? Up the tempo a little bit, right? But there's benefits from following through and doing the hard thing mentally, in addition to all the physiological benefits, right? I mean, it's a sauna, for example, is a cardiovascular workout. That's one of the main benefits of it. And it's something that, when I track it with my watch, or if I wear a chest strap or something, my heart rate's in the 140s, 150s. It's a low aerobic workout, and it's zero impact. I'm not running, I'm not banging, I'm not getting miles in, I'm not putting stress or impact forces on anything. I'm sitting, and
so
yeah.
When you're sitting in the sauna and you feel that uncomfortable energy start to creep up on you, where your body's in discomfort, you want to get the hell out of there, what are some of the things you either do with your body or mind or both that for you squeeze out extra minutes to get where you need to be to stay in the sauna and push the range of time maybe past what you did the previous week or the previous day? What are some of the things you say to yourself? What are some of the things that you do to consciously push past the previous point that you were at time-wise in the sauna?
Anytime I catch myself mentally going awry or getting into like a negative feedback loop, or going down a path I don't want to go mentally, right? I check my breath, and I almost immediately do box breathing. I try to slow my breath down, 5 seconds in, hold at the top for 5, 5-second exhale, hold at the bottom for 5. I know if I do that 3 times, that's a minute. And I see how long I can do that. Eventually, especially if my heart rate's kind of raising up and it is getting pretty hot, I'll have to shorten the duration of some or all of those pieces. Then maybe I drop down to 3s, or maybe I just go in and do, maybe I need to do a couple long exhales, or maybe I need to just do some quick kind of Wim Hof style breathing, like just to kind of like ramp it up a little bit. But I'll bring an emphasis and a focus to my breath. Typically it's slowing it down. Rarely, sometimes it's ramping it up. And then, a lot of times when I'm in the sauna, I'm doing some form of like visualization. I'll get in and I'll think about being at the end of a race, or I'll think about, just something forward, something uplifting, something momentum or generating or momentous or something like that, just to keep me engaged mentally and not thinking about the hard thing that's happening, not thinking about the discomfort. It's the same concept on a long run. When I'm thinking about every step, it's way harder than if I can, zone into a thought process or get into a mantra, and then I'm like, holy shit, it's been another mile. That's great. So.
So it sounds like you use breathing and also different thought processes to focus your mind, like you said, away from the hard thing, a task at the moment, and combine those two can help you push past the time that you thought you might get out, or maybe you would have gotten out at a point in the future. The breath work, slowing the breath, it sounds like the body then follows, and also switching up your thought process can have the effect of making you feel like you can stay in the sauna longer, and then eventually you do.
100%. And you can trick, you can talk your way into it sometimes. You can sunny and 75 it, it's balmy 60s. You say that to yourself over and over and over and over and over again. And, you can buy some time there. But I think you got to trick your rational mind. You've got to trick your unconscious mind. You've got to just stay in the game, like stay in the fight, like do what you can do to overcome the part of you that wants to quit. And sometimes I'll my bottle's getting too hot. Let me open the door, and I'll like stick the bottle outside, and you get that little waft of fresh air, and then you close the door.
Yeah.
But then what I end up doing is I'm like, oh, you fucker. Like, and then I'll go to 35 minutes as opposed to 30, and it just sucks even more, and so it's tricking yourself enough.
I did something similar. I did something similar with my phone to give myself an out. You mentioned you would open the door to cool off the bottle a little bit. I would bring my phone in a lot of times, and so whenever that warning went off on my phone, if I was listening to a song or a podcast where it said, your phone's overheated because you're sitting in a fucking 180-degree sauna, surprise, get out, you fucking idiot. I'd be like, oh, whoa, it looks like my phone can't take it anymore. And I'm going to have to, make sure my phone makes it back into my locker. So as much as I wanted to stay in for another 25 minutes, I just have to get out now because my phone, I can't live without my phone.
It's crazy how that works. Yeah, it's the games we play with ourselves, The social aspect, too, I feel like can be part of a game in the sauna, because when I was, back in school, if I was in the sauna with 3-4 other guys, maybe even one other person, whether it was a teammate or a stranger, we might not say that we're talking to get ourselves through the discomfort. Sometimes I feel like it's almost understood where I'm in the sauna with someone else and we get to a point we just actively start telling each other stories. What'd you do yesterday? Tell me in detail what you did yesterday. That leads to another story, and all of a sudden, 7 minutes pass, or you go past what you originally planned to stay in because you weren't paying attention. And the social element of the sauna is another boost in a way, another game in a way, where you can almost trick yourself conversationally into staying into the sauna for much longer when you're with someone else, because then you don't only have to have a conversation in your own head, which, it's much easier to succumb to pressure sometimes when you're by yourself. When you're with someone else, maybe you saw them walk in after you, so you saw them in there before you, so you think, oh, I don't want to come in and then get out before this guy or girl gets out. Yeah,
I need to stay in for as long as them. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, no one else is in the sauna, and you start talking to them, and this whole social aspect of it feeds into that pushing past the initial barrier you set for yourself.
And that's a great point to think about. You're you're talking to so-and-so or such and such, and, the conversation's going, and, you look down at your watch and there's your 30-minute timer, but, it's not like, oh, great. Thanks, man. This is good. Got to go. Like, conversation's got to end, it's got to flow. Maybe it's good and you keep going. And ultimately, like you said, you're in there for 33 minutes or 38 minutes or 42 minutes, and you've pushed that boundary, and it hasn't necessarily been something where, it was, that hard per se, or maybe it was hard, but you did it together with someone else, and you guys got through it, and it was a lot farther than you would have done if you did it alone. So I think there's a lot to that, plus the benefits of community, the benefits of conversation with people, right? Like that can't be overstated. So, or understated.
Yeah, I was listening to, or watching rather, it's on YouTube, a talk by Dr. Rhonda Patrick at the Biohacker Summit. It's called Health Benefits of Sauna and Cold Exposure. And if you're interested in the scientific approach to all of the specific mechanisms in your body that are going on, Rhonda Patrick is an unbelievable resource on hot and cold exposure. So I highly recommend just Googling Dr. Rhonda Patrick sauna and seeing what videos and podcasts and YouTube videos come up. She gave such a great explanation in this video at the Biohacker Summit of why the feel-good feelings of being in a sauna translate to things outside of heat exposure. So, for example, she also spoke about feeling the effects of the sauna during her undergraduate experience as well, which I thought was kind of funny when she was studying and she's like, fuck this, I need to get in the sauna. I felt that. She gave this section of the talk where she goes through the processes that are happening, and I'll give a brief overview of the process, and you can go into the full 40-minute talk if you'd like to go through the actual specifics in detail. She talks about why sauna translates to anxiety reduction in studying, or maybe having easier conversations in relationships, why your body gets better just handling stress overall and not just getting better at heat exposure. And so the heat from the sauna, as she explains it, causes you to release dynorphins, which are the things that make you feel discomfort, makes you feel dysphoria, that feeling of I need to get the fuck out of the sauna. Eventually enough of those dynorphins build up, and if you don't want to die, you eventually leave. And this happens when you work out too, when you're lifting weights, when you run long distances, you get that discomfortable feeling. The release of dynorphin causes your body to make more mu-opioid receptors, and mu-opioid receptors are the receptors for endorphins. So they're the opposite of dynorphins. When your body starts producing a lot of dynorphins in the sauna, that is a signal to your body of, okay, I need to make more receptors for endorphins, basically more places for endorphins to land in your body, and that allows you to have more space to essentially feel good. That it gives them more, that gives the endorphins more space to work, and they can bind to the receptors for longer, and there are also more of them.
So other things that feel good, like
so then she kind of wraps it up.
Yeah, explain that.
Yeah, and then she kind of wraps it up by saying the same thing that creates endorphins, the same act, whether it's making out with someone or it's laughing, whatever it is, your body gets better at feeling better. So because the dynorphins have signaled your body as a result of sitting in the sauna to create more mu-opioid receptors, then when your endorphins are released during activities that make your body feel good, more receptors are available for the endorphins to bind to, so you're feeling more of them and they stay attached for longer and the effects last. And so that's why the effects of feeling good and getting out of the sauna and being like, whew, like I'm good to go, I'm relaxed, that's why it translates to other activities, and it lasts for a long period of time, of course, depending on the dosage and the frequency that you go in the sauna. But when I heard her explain that, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense, because like the other things that I do in combination with going in the sauna, like it's almost like turning up the brightness 5%. Like it's not, it doesn't feel like I'm on drugs or anything. I don't feel like I'm on ecstasy when I'm doing, when I'm laughing or hanging out with friends after the sauna, but I do feel a slightly elevated mood that probably wouldn't have been there without consistent sauna use. And now with this explanation from Dr. Rhonda Patrick, that kind of put the blocks together for me, where I went, oh shit, like that's why sauna is great. It's not that I want my body to become better at handling heat stress. If I had a job, like I was a firefighter and I needed to work under heat stress, sure, that would be great. But that's why it can be used by anybody, because if you laugh, if you're in a relationship and you're touching someone, if you're working out and getting endorphins, whatever it is, the sauna is an enhancement for any activity that involves the release of endorphins.
Such a great point, man. That's such a great point. I love that. And, yeah, that's a great point as well. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be about getting the health benefits from it. I mean, it feels good. It feels good to sit in a sauna. Maybe it's not for 30 minutes. Maybe it's for 10 or 20, right? Like, but it feels good. So, awesome point.
Yeah. For going back to the social aspects of saunas a little bit, I wanted to see if you could talk about your experiences doing retreats that involve either heat exposure, cold exposure, some type of intentional sauna use or intentional cold bath use, and how the social aspect of it changed the experience for that weekend, getting together with a group of people with the set intention to change your bodies with temperature.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only experience I've had with temperature in a group setting in that type of scenario is with cold tubs and cold baths and cold exposure and stuff. I've done that a number of times, and it's if everybody's going to react differently. Not everybody's done a cold tub before. Not everyone's done one that cold before. Not everyone has there's the natural response that happens. I mean, I've a couple hundred ice baths in, I get the same fear response. I get the same increase of heart rate. I feel it right in my diaphragm, right? Like I got to take a big breath, right? My mind starts racing. I start to try to negotiate with myself. Like it's a fear response, and people have that. And yet when you're with a community, when you're with other people who you've, build a bond with over, a day or a weekend or an hour, whatever it may be. But when you're with people that you trust, or there's some rapport there, and you're safe because it's only for a little period of time. It's 1 minute, it's 3 minutes, it's 5 minutes, right? You're going to be okay. You're still going through and doing that hard thing, and you've still got that camaraderie there, and there's that level of safety and vulnerability. Like, everybody's being vulnerable together. Everybody's working through it together. There's the feel-good aspects afterwards, the endorphins that are flowing afterwards. And so it's a really powerful experience, bringing those types of temperature extremes to groups of people, just from a feel-good standpoint and a healing standpoint,
Yeah, I can imagine when you're doing hot and cold exposure in a group setting by yourself, it's going to have an effect where things start to feel better. The same experiences start to feel better, like we just talked about with the endorphins. And so when you combine that in a community setting, that feels like, and I've never done a retreat that involved any sort of temperature, hot cold therapy, things like that, but I can imagine that in a setting like that it would kind of supercharge the whole weekend, because everyone's feeling good, you're feeling good, and the social and the physical and the physiological are feeding off each other.
100%. And it's a lot of times there's breath work combined, right? I mean, I'm wearing a shirt from the Chi Bros. I got to shout these guys out. Ice and Iron,
yes,
up in Boston. Yeah. The back of the shirt says "Cheat up from the feet up," right? Which I love. Tai
cheat
Chi,
up from the feet up.
Yeah, cheat up from the feet up. But there's a yin and a yang, right? And the ultimately Tai Chi, Qigong, exercise, yoga, whatever it is, it's if you break it down, it's moving and breathing, right? And when we can get really fundamental with things, we can get really fundamental with things with, not only by ourselves, but then with a group of people, where we're back to basics, we're fundamental, we're nature, we're earth, we're just like alive. This is just being alive, You experience that with a group of people, and that's a really, really profound thing. It really is.
Yeah. So how does the Tai Chi and the hot and cold exposure, do they mix that together anyway? You said their name is the Chi Bros.
Yeah. They've got a thing called ice and iron where they'll mix in.
Same guys as ice and iron. Okay.
Yeah. Similar. I believe so. But they've got, and Wim Hof does something similar. I've seen Brandon Powell from, he's a master Wim Hof practitioner here in the States. He does something similar, but it's like you want to get to moving again. Like if you get in the cold, right, and you are cold, well, we have a mechanism to create heat within our own body, right? It's by breathing and moving, right? And so either before you get into a cold tub, right, there are certain breathing styles that, where I might want to calm myself down in a sauna. Maybe I want to ramp myself up for an ice tub because it is inherently a much more sympathetic nervous system generating thing, right? So stimulating that nervous system with some breathing or some moving either beforehand to generate heat so you can kind of like take the cold better, or afterwards to warm yourself up. That's all part of it, and again, like depending on how intense you want to be or how intentional you want to be, it's all just breathing and moving,
Yeah, there's a video on the Ice and Iron Instagram page where you're holding the unicorn, your spirit animal for that day. And the actual video is about 30 seconds long, somewhere in there for Instagram, but it looks like you were doing some breathing exercises before you got in the tub, and then once you got in the tub, you were still doing some breathing, but I'm not sure if it was an intentional exercise or if it was more a physiological reaction to the coldness of the tub, because it looked fucking cold, and your breath was also, I don't know what the actual temperature outside was, but it looked like it was cold enough to actually see your breath. And
yeah, it was cold.
So when you're about to get into the cold tub, what was going through your mind in that specific instance? What were you thinking? What were you doing with your body, breathing? How are you preparing yourself? And then once you dunked, what were you consciously choosing to do in the tub before you got out that changed your experience, hopefully for the better?
Yeah. Everybody's going to have a fear response or a physiological response to some capacity, right? And one of the things that I've done now with my ice practice or cold practice is my goal is to get my breath calm, like low and slow as soon as I can. Right. And I might have to do a couple like, just before I get in. Right. But once I get in, once my feet hit and once I drop down into the tub, naturally, the heart rate goes up. It's like right. Like, and my goal is to bring it calm and smooth as soon as I possibly can. So be still, be calm, and just be, right? And I found that when I'm just being in the cold environment, that's when I'm able to like go the longest. That's when it's the clearest. That's when I'm the stillest, the quietest. That's when I get the most benefits of it. And things it gets cold, right? Sometimes my hands are above, sometimes my hands are below. And same thing when I dunk at the end. If I've got enough space to dip my head in, I'll do that, and I'll come up and I'll wait till my breath is calm in order to get out. I'll typically do that. Okay. And then I'll get up and get out, right? But people are going to react differently. And a lot of times it is a big shock. Maybe if it's a new thing for somebody, I mean, it's like getting dunked in cold water, your body's going to react. It's just the way that it is. And maybe you've adapted, maybe you haven't. If you haven't adapted, then that could be more of a shock than if you have. But it's about getting control of that breath.
Yeah, it sounds like getting control of the breath and doing these intentional breathing exercises can, to an extent, stop the fear response from completely taking over. I don't think there's any way that you'll be able to completely subdue that, but from what you're describing, it sounds like you use the breath work, you leverage the breath work to put yourself in a position to just be in the tub and focus on being rather than focus on the fear. And that allows you to sink into a state of being present and, in a some sick way, some get strapped, stay strapped way, enjoying the experience of being dunked into freezing water, dunking yourself into freezing water.
Yeah, I mean, it can be enjoyable. It can, especially, I really like if we are in a tub and there is a ton of ice, like you get a couple 100 pounds of ice in a big tub, like get a nice layer, kind of get underneath it, and a layer kind of like sits on your chest, and it's like you're kind of like snug in there. It's pretty nice. But one thing I have noticed is whether it's someone's first ice bath or 100th ice bath, like typically within 30, 45 seconds, most people can get calm. And if you are doing it with someone else, right? Like I've had experiences where I've been leading, or co-leading the ice bath portion, right, of a particular event, like the breathing in the bath portion, and someone will come in and they'll sink down in the tub and they have that, response. And what we'll do is we'll just lock eyes, right? And if you're the calmest person in the room at that moment and you don't let the gaze up, right, that person's going to sink down, settle down into your spot, right? You sync breaths, you sync energies, and you just sit and you lock eyes.
I'm half expecting you to push yourself out of an ice tub as we end off this podcast. So the entire time your lower half has just been submerged in an ice tub, talking at a normal, calm voice, and it's just we can attempt that one day. I'm definitely going to have to adapt my body much closer to the way that you've adapted it to even achieve a 5 or a 10-minute podcast at that state.
The body does adapt, right? And it is something where you can get better over time with it, but it starts to feel good, and like that like you said, kind of like weird way, in a way that things that are good for you start to feel good, right? You start eating a little bit better, and maybe the clean food does taste a little bit better, and you start working out a little bit, and maybe it does kind of feel good when you get in the gym, right? Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I know it's a pain in the ass, but it feels good, and it, right? And it starts to get better, and those things do happen. They do happen, and it's fucking good for you. It's good for you.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect transition, because I wanted to switch back to the sauna a little bit and go through some of the main points that Dr. Rhonda Patrick talked about. Just quickly to touch on these from the Biohacker Summit conference, and I'm going to link everything in the podcast description. If you're listening to this or watching this right now, it'll be in there to go check it out yourself. So all the resources will be linked in the podcast notes. And so some of the other things that go off of it's good for you, this is how good for you it can be. So this is a Finnish study that examined Finnish men, the Finns, people from Finland. They seem like they're on top of the sauna game. They're basically just like, yeah, we've been doing this shit forever. It's about time the rest of the world caught on.
Right. Those Scandinavians,
but yeah,
let me tell you what.
Yeah, exactly. So this Finnish study found that men who use the sauna 2 to 3 times per week were 27% less likely to die from cardiovascular disease than those who used it once per week. So 2 to 3 times per week in the sauna, you're 27% less likely. It lowers your chances of 27% of cardiovascular disease compared to men who only use it once per week. Those who used it 5 to 7 times per week were 50% less likely to succumb to cardiovascular disease than the once per week group. 19 plus minutes seemed to be the most optimal zone, and the temperatures ranged anywhere from 160 degrees Fahrenheit to I believe almost 200 degrees. I think it was like 195 degrees Fahrenheit. And the men who use the sauna 4 to 7 times per week were also 40% less likely to die of all-cause mortality. So 40% less likely to die of anything that's a non-accidental death. So it also translates to things like Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases in general, not just cardiovascular disease. So as Dr. Rhonda Patrick goes through just like specifically all of these ways in which the sauna feels good, and then she also ties in the actual statistics and allows you to take a bite out of, okay, this is an idea of the percentages. If I start this now, not only is this going to put me in a more desired state, I'm not just going to feel good to things that translate outside of sauna usage, but I'm going to set myself up to be at less risk, nothing's certain, but less risk of getting heart disease, and just overall allowing yourself to all-cause mortality. 40% less likely to die of all-cause mortality using the sauna 4 to 7 times per week, and like 40% is wild, and it's everything, and there's still a lot of studies being done, and I'm sure they're going to continue to do studies on sauna exposure and cold exposure as well. But just like those 4 things alone, if you weren't sure about whether it would be worth it to try the sauna at least, or introduce it into your life in a more regular fashion, it's a pretty convincing argument.
That was a long-term study with over 2,000 some participants, right? It was a well-done study. It's a well-known study now, and it was landmark because it did show that this is like seriously healthy. I mean, could be on par with like drinking water and sleeping, right? Because ultimately it's a survival mechanism, right? As a people, we came out of hot environments, right? Like as a people, we've survived in cold environments, extremely cold environments. And these are survival mechanisms. And right now, the vast majority of us, right, at least listening to this podcast, live in an environment between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 24/7, right? I mean, we're in air conditioning.
One slice of temperature.
Yeah, you're in a car, you're in your house, you're at the office, you're at work. Maybe you walk to your car and you're like, fuck, it's hot. You get in your car and you crank up the AC and then it's back to 68 degrees. We get conditioned for this one slice of temperature, as you said, and we have been designed to experience large swaths of temperature extremes for large periods of time.
Yeah, it makes me think about meditation in a way, because for so long, I had only occupied one slice of conscious reality. And if I was super present, it just happened to be an accident where something was happening to me that forced me to be extremely present. And then introducing meditation on a regular basis allowed me to visit other slices of reality that occur when you're extremely present. And so the sauna, same shit. You can exist in another slice of temperature reality. Shit is actually different. It feels different. It sounds different. May even start to look different at a certain point, or depending what type of sauna you're using. And so it is kind of like you're traveling in a way, because you're visiting these different states. And like you said, we're used to being in the same state. Most people are used to being in the same state. I was in the same state, up until I was probably 19, 20 years old, when I stayed in the sauna for the first time for more than 10 minutes. And it is like you're traveling in a way.
And, think about it from like an efficiency standpoint, like a biohacking standpoint or something I don't have a very firm and routine meditation practice. I know that's something that you do have, and that, we've talked about a number of times on and off podcasts, right? I do a lot of walking meditations, right? I stand in my garden and don't think about shit and water my garden for 20 minutes every morning. And I feel like I'm calling that a meditation, right? And
it may be,
and it may be, right? Certainly. And when I'm sitting in the sauna, let's say I was in the sauna that's behind me for 30 minutes, right? It's an infrared sauna. It gets up to 140 degrees, right? It's like, they call it a 2-person sauna. It's like a 1.5-person sauna. You got to be really close to the person you're in that sauna with. Let's put it to you that way.
Yeah.
But it's I can stack a lot of things at one time. Like, okay, I'm in the sauna. I got my water, right? So I'm taking down a liter of water, right? I'm typically reading for the first 15 minutes. I got a couple books in there, right? That I'm slowly making my way through until I get too sweaty and I start to get the pages wet. So the first 15 minutes I'm reading, I'm advancing myself, right? Then maybe I've got a podcast going if I'm in there for longer, or better yet, and most of the time I don't have my phone in there, and that last 15 minutes is me and me. That's it. Like, not listening to shit, not doing shit. I'm with me, right? Maybe I'm incorporating breath work, right? Maybe I'm sitting still. Maybe I'm having a conversation with myself. But there's a lot of things that can happen at one time to make that 30 minutes valuable. And that's just me and my sauna here. That's not taken into consideration like a community experience, right? But we can start stacking these things to make things, maybe achievable, right?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with the infrared sauna? Because I imagine that's something that a lot of people may be interested in, because it allows you to make the sauna a more active part of your daily routine. So could you talk about how big it is, what it actually looks like, your routine leading up to the sauna and frequency, to give people kind of a general overview of your infrared sauna practice and what that looks like, and then we can get into more of the specifics of what you do. There it is. She's a beauty.
There it is. She's a beaut, if you could see it. But the sauna, like I said, gets up to about 140 degrees. It's different than like a sauna that's typically going to be in a gym, right? Like the saunas, where they got the rocks that heat up or whatever, that's like a dry heat sauna, right? That's going to be a different type of heat. The infrared supposedly kind of penetrates a little bit deeper into your body, right? And has some benefits there, right? With that infrared. I think that's going to be somewhat similar to benefits from maybe like a red light, like an infrared red light, which I really like, right? I've got a lot of anti-inflammation and a lot of like anti-soreness benefits from using a infrared red light, but that's a different conversation. But it's, this is like an office. This is a rather, I guess, normal size office, small size office. It's not even like labeled a bedroom. It's labeled an office. And so the sauna fits in this space, and, ultimately it takes probably 15, 20 minutes to heat up, but, you build that into whatever you're doing, and it gets to 140 degrees in 20 minutes. And then that means I got 40 minutes, if I don't press any other buttons to rock,
Yeah. For people that are just listening to this, Dave is showing the sauna on the YouTube version. It looks like it's
like phone booth size.
Like a phone booth size. I was gonna say like a glorified refrigerator, just like the biggest refrigerator you've ever seen, but not something that can't fit into the corner of a room. And it looks like it's about, what is it, like 6-7 feet,
6
something
feet,
like that?
6 feet.
6 feet?
6 feet. I'm like 5'9". I can stand up, and if I tippy toe it, I'm touching. So.
And two people can fit in there. Two people can squeeze and sit in there, and it'll be all right.
Yep, it'll be all right. It's got a cool it's got a cool feature on where it's like a light feature, and you can turn the light on, and it'll be like different colors, right? But I like a red light environment. That's just like a calm, chilling light to me, right? So I'll turn it on red. Like I said, sometimes I'll have music going, sometimes I don't. But I do keep magazines in there, right? I keep, a couple different books in there, and, especially books that you can kind of like flip to, right? It's not necessarily the best to just, if you're trying to read a novel, that's going to be tough. But if I can flip through a book, I've got a couple books in there that I'll spend some time with every now and then. So.
And time-wise, because I imagine, and for me as well, people will be interested in how much time it takes to do a full infrared sauna session outside the actual time in the sauna. So how long do you, or when would you turn it on? When does it kind of heat up and get going? Because I've seen different time estimates on how long the sauna takes to heat up. So when do you usually flick it on? When do you get in? How long do you stay in for on average? And kind of give us a overview of the actual time frame of a sauna session in the infrared sauna.
In an infrared sauna, right, it takes at least 20 minutes to heat up, to get into that like mid 130s range. I found that this sauna like will top out at 140, and then it'll kind of like go back down, and I like hit the up button on the heat, and it's still like set at 140. I'm like, what the fuck, you know? But so it'll be like 140, and then like high 130s. It'll kind of sit in that range. It takes me, you know, so let's say that's the first 20 minutes, right? So I hit go, right? 20 minutes is it heating up, right? I get in, you know, let's call it 40 minutes left. That first 15 minutes is pretty comfortable, honestly. You know, the infrared is going to be different than the dry heat. Like if you walk into a dry heat sauna, you're like smacked in the face, like, fuck, it's hot, right? The infrared is a little bit different with that. It kind of comes on slow, but then it feels like after that, or at that 15-minute mark roundabout, you know, so 25 minutes left or so, it's like every pore is sweating. You're like sweating like internally, right? It's not like an outward sweat. It's like an internal.
So you still get a deep sweat.
Oh,
you still get a deep sweat in there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You know, and then it's a matter of like how long you want to be in for. You know, I found, and actually this is funny because last year I was using the sauna damn near daily, right? This year when it was cold, I was using the sauna more, so kind of like wintertime. Springtime hit, I got to traveling a little bit, and I didn't use it a ton, and I haven't used it a lot until about 3 weeks ago. I started noticing I started doing some like hot, longer runs and hot training sessions. And, you know, like, shit, I can't run until 11:30. It's already, you know, 94 degrees with a real feel of like 104 in the sun. And I'm fucking trying to run hills, and I'm getting the life sucked out of me. And I had a realization that I lost my heat adaptation. I wasn't adapted because I wasn't using the sauna. And since then, I've been in the sauna probably 4 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week. If I'm on my shit, I'm up, I wake up, I hit go on the sauna, I drink my water, I do a lap. We got like a 1 mile little loop that I do. And by the time I get back 20 minutes later, you know, I can get in the sauna, and then it's pretty much nice and good and ready to rock. But I've noticed that I've been handling heat better, even in probably the 3 weeks that I've been working on that. So
even though you're not doing aerobic exercises inside the sauna, you feel like it's improving the way that your body goes through the process of heating up when you're doing something like running a Spartan race, for example, or going on a run, going on a bike, something like that.
For sure. I feel like I'm physiologically adapting to heat better and able to sustain like working out in heat longer. You know, my heart rate's getting into the 140s, which is again like a low aerobic zone, right? That fat burning zone, that endurance based zone. That's like a slow run zone for me, you know, and so I'm feeling that, but I'm also mentally like there's a different feeling when you're exercising and you get tired and things, you start to talk to yourself, right? And then there's a different feeling when you're hot. And like when you're hot, like that panic can start to raise, right? Because sometimes, or at least for me, right? Like I've noticed my panic button start to get hit internally when I'm really, really, really hot, because it's like you can't stop running and have that pain go away, right? It's like you stop running and you're still fucking hot, and it's like, you know, the heart rate's banging, you hear and feel your heart, you know, like pouring sweat. Maybe I'm starting to get like cold, and I'm like, oh shit, you know, and I've noticed that I can handle that better because of the sauna sessions, because I go through a little mini panic getting to 30 or 40 minutes in my sauna sessions. So when I'm actually outside and it's hot, you know, one of the benefits of sauna and repeated heat exposure, you sweat at a lower temperature, you know, so it's, you know, or you can handle a higher temperature without starting to sweat rather, right? And you know, that's an important thing, right? Like you're able to, you know, again, physiologically and mentally respond better to the stresses of heat.
Yeah. Dr. Andrew Huberman over at Stanford, he has a podcast called Huberman Lab, which I highly recommend checking out. And he talks about the body's response to heat, where it's not just a tiring feeling. Your muscles literally stop working at a certain temperature, or if they've been exposed to a certain amount of heat for a longer period of time where the ATP gets depleted, your muscles stop firing, and people have died because they've been so good at turning off that panic response like you're talking about, where I'm heating up and I'm just gonna keep going. Maybe your heart is racing, maybe you're starting to get crazy thoughts, and there have been people that have been these extreme sport athletes, extreme distance athletes, endurance athletes that get so good at pushing through the body's physiological response of the muscles stop firing. They basically can like will themselves sometimes to death to overtake the body's reaction. It was crazy. When I was listening
that's it. We're not advocating that by any way, shape, or form here in this discussion on this podcast. Listen to yourself. But there's in sport, he in the moment, right? In training, it's he who can recover from the most volume wins, right? That's the person that's going to be the fittest, right? And in sport, two equally fit people, he who suffers most wins that race, right? Or wins that event, right? And if the body can adapt to a point where you're sitting in the low 180 heart rates, you're well above threshold, and you're holding it for 2 hours, right? 2.5 hours, right? And it's fucking hot, and you're dehydrated, and things are cramping, and things are hurting, but you're still going, like, you got a good chance of doing well at whatever that sport is, or you're in the race and you're still cruising at the end regardless. Like, if you want to be good at something like that, you got to be good at overcoming the quit, right? And there's the mental aspect to that, but then there's also oh wow, my body physiologically hasn't adapted to this, and thus like I can't keep going, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's
competition.
The two sides.
Competition adds in that whole other side where you're actively pushing yourself past a point where long term it may not be good for you to enter some of those states on a consistent basis, but you're also in it because you're in it to win it, and so you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna do whatever I have to do to win. And where I imagine most people that are listening to this are not competitive athletes that are running ultra marathons or endurance marathons, or maybe even Spartan races like yourself. And so again, we are advocating in these segments long-term health, long-term benefits. So if something is not gonna make you be around 10 years from now, then you got to listen to your body, and only you can do that at a certain point. We can give you a general idea of talking about our experiences and the things that we've researched, but only you can be your own self-advocate for starting things up or shutting them down.
Yeah, and start. You don't got to be in a race. You don't got to be pushing yourself for 2.5 hours at 180 heart rate. And it's good for you to do that for a minute or 2 to 3 days a week, especially if you haven't done it. Because ultimately that example of the competition is one end of the extreme that may kill 1 or 2 people, but the other end of that extreme, the other end of that spectrum, kills hundreds of thousands. Obesity and inactivity kills way more than someone blowing up because they are running bad water 135 in the middle of the desert. So there is a start
yeah
be better.
Start be better. We started talking about the competition aspect, and you yourself run Spartan races, and you have been for a long time now, and you're looking for ways actively to biohack yourself into better times, and looking for things to improve your performance in these Spartan races. And going back to Andrew Huberman, he had a recent podcast on cooling and performance. So this would be kind of a cool transition to get into cold exposure and the cooling aspect tied into competition. And this applies to recreational athletes and professional athletes. Both types of people were studied. And this is what I'm going to get into is the work of Craig Heller at Stanford University. And Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about cooling and performance on his podcast, The Huberman Lab. And I'll link to the episode as well in the description. And when I heard this, I thought of you, because I was like, fuck, like this is literally right up your alley of performing longer or performing better for long distances and in races that involve not only endurance but also resistance as well and strength exercises. So I'm excited you might have been you might have heard some of this research already. I'm not sure what you know about the cooling studies at Stanford, but I'm excited to get into this because I think it's something that you'll probably end up using.
Sweet, dive in. I'm stoked.
So to start off, here's a quote from Dr. Huberman. He says, "Temperature is the most powerful variable for improving physical performance and for recovery. I'd argue it's even more important than sleep." So based on the studies that Dr. Huberman's going through at this moment, he said word for word that temperature is the most powerful variable for improving physical performance. I'd argue it's even more important than sleep. And that gives you an idea of how enthusiastic and the science, because he's a neuroscientist by trade. He would not be making a statement like that if there was not ample research to back it up at this point. And so let's get into some of that shit.
This may show how much of a nerd I am, but that statement gave me goosebumps because I know what you're about to say is going to be fucking legit. So
yes, dude. I will do my best to translate the main points of the study into a way that can be understood by neuroscience peasants like myself. And for those listening who don't have a neuroscience background, I'm doing my best going through these studies. So he talks about, but before he gets into the actual studies by Craig Heller at Stanford, he talks about the basics of cooling and performance. So this is still Dr. Huberman talking about this. He says, why focus on cooling with performance? And so we already mentioned that when the muscles heat up too much, they lose the ability to contract. The ATP stops generating, and the range for this temperature where ATP stops generating is actually not that big. We're still finding out more about the range at which the muscles can function under heat for a certain period of time, but it's actually smaller than what researchers previously thought. And so the three compartments on our body that are the best for passing heat and coolness are as follows. It's the face, the palms of the hands, and the bottoms of the feet. And in layman's terms, this is how I understood the essence of what Dr. Huberman was talking about from Craig Heller's studies. It's that these areas have blood flow that are different, that allows heat and cold to pass through more quickly and more of it. So if our hands and our bottoms of the feet and the face essentially had these valves on it, if they did, I'm not saying they do, but just to get like a visual, these valves are larger than the valves that would be on the other areas of our body. So whatever is coming in, whatever temperature is coming in, it's going to fill those valves more fully, and it's going to happen also more quickly because there's more of a flow. And so the actual physics of these areas of the body with the skin, the veins, the blood vessels, the face, the palms, and the bottom of your foot, that is where heat and cold pass the most efficiently in terms of the volume and also how quickly it passes. So that is something to keep in mind as we go forward. The reason for that specifically that he goes into is these things called AVAs. It's difference in the types of blood vessels, and I'll let Dr. Huberman take that away in ways that I can't begin to describe. But now,
show notes. Continue.
Exactly. Show notes. Keeping that in mind, and I also feel goosebumps too talking about this because it's literally the craziest shit that I've read in a very long time. So keeping those three areas of the body in mind, the face, the palms of the hands, and the feet, we've identified that these are the most efficient at passing coolness and warmth, and this is super applicable for performance and competition because, as I just said, your muscles stop working when they reach a certain temperature, when they get too hot. So in terms of performance, you want to leverage these three areas so that your muscles don't stop working, so that they don't get too hot. So the whole focus of this is to allow your body to let go of the heat to your muscles and continue performance. And so this leads me to the first study by Craig Heller. It's called the tight end dip study. And so tight end in football, dips where you're pressing up tricep exercise in the gym. And so the tight end dip study, and this is an excerpt from the study, and then I'll go through how I interpreted it. This is word for word from the study. He writes, a tight end for the San Francisco 49ers performed tricep dips in his regular exercise routine. He was able to do 40 in his first set, 4-0, with decreasing numbers in 4 subsequent sets, ending in muscle fatigue. So the tight end in a lab setting, did 40 dips, first set, gradually got lower and lower and lower. And then by the 4th set, he had totaled 103 dips total across all 4 sets. On a subsequent trial day, he was cooled between sets. And so the first 103 total reps, there was no extra assistance from temperatures, simply just doing the dips, resting in between as far as I could tell, and then doing more dips. On the subsequent trial day, he was cooled between sets. And so basically, with one hand, the tight end was holding on to a cooling device. It kind of looked like a metal pipe in the picture. And you can go into the exact temperature in the study, but essentially you want to cool the hand, but not make it too cold so your blood vessels constrict. You don't want them to vasoconstrict too much to where, nothing can pass through. You want a cooling effect. You don't want a freezing effect.
Okay.
And so the tight end was cooled between sets on the subsequent trial day, and his numbers for the sets were considerably higher. He did 135 total dips, and he was able to do 4 additional sets, so 63 additional dips in addition to the 135. He continued to use the cooling during his twice-a-week workouts, and in 4 weeks, he was doing 310 dips in a session. So the only thing that changed was the cooling device that they used in this lab, to where in between sets, he was holding on with one hand. And from what I understand, and it goes into scientific detail in the study, that cooling effect through the palms of his hand allowed the temperature of the cooling device, the metal pipe, whatever it was, to pass through into his system. It goes throughout his body in a manner where his muscles were being cooled, but not cooled to the point where it would be stiff or inhibit performance. It was simply keeping them at an optimal temperature around what it would be during the first set, but for all 4 sets. So under normal conditions, your muscles get hotter and hotter and hotter. Eventually they fatigue to where your number of reps drops precipitously. With the cooling device, he was able to hang on to that device during rest, and I believe it was a 40% increase. Double the output in dips. And there's also another pull-up study where it tripled and quadrupled with outputs with the cooling device. And that is the only thing that changed. There was no, assuming the diet and intake of other supplements remained the same. The only thing that changed was the period of time. It was 4 weeks, and the cooling device. It's crazy.
I'm looking at 2 buckets in my backyard, and I'm going to fill those buckets with ice water. And I'm going to get my assault bike and some kettlebells and shit, and I'm going to just stick my feet and my hands in the buckets of ice water, or maybe even in the freezer, and experiment with this from a rep standpoint. And I'm thinking like the assault bike would work really well from like a Tabata standpoint, for example, where if I were to do a 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off for 8 sets. That's called a Tabata, right? And you do hard for 20 seconds and rest for 10 seconds. And, that's ultimately 4 minutes of exercise, right? I could see the output of that with that cooling mechanism in between being so much higher over a period of time versus just doing it without the cooling. That's wild.
Yeah. This is something that I wrote after what I just read from the study. After reading it, I wrote down studies have shown that when you leverage these 3 areas of the body, you can double the amount of dips, triple or quadruple the amount of pull-ups, and it applies to recreational and pro athletes. And you also vastly improve aerobic output. There's a Treadmill Study that I'm going to get into shortly. And again, I'll link the individual studies, the episodes of the Andrew Huberman podcast, the Huberman Lab, so you can go through this yourself and take a look at it. Because if you're just listening to this and you're familiar with athletic performance and what it feels like to fail in a set, it sounds unbelievable that holding on to a cooling device in between sets can improve your performance by double, triple, and quadruple. But with who they're studying and what they're studying right now, these are simply what the experiments show. And for your experiment in the backyard, I would say, this is just based off of me going through the study this week, so I'm in no way an expert on this type of therapy or performance, but I would say what was important in the study was to not have both limbs on the same part of the body in experiencing coolness. So it was almost
interesting.
The way it sounds in the study is almost like a circuit for a battery where like you don't want both to be plugged in. It's kind of like a loop in your body where putting only one hand on this device had the effect of allowing the heat to circulate better than if you had put both hands on the same cooling device. And they're also developing this technology they're testing it on UFC fighters. Andrew Huberman got on the Joe Rogan podcast and said that they're currently looking at this with people competing in UFC to possibly do something in between rounds, because one of the things that people think, and what I thought before reading this, is that the best way to cool yourself is to put a cold towel or an ice towel on your neck, and it feels good, but apparently it's actually worse for you because it basically tells your brain to heat you up because it's getting a signal that is not what you would want in that situation. The proper way to do it would be through leveraging these pathways that we just talked about with the palms of the hands, the face, and the bottoms of the feet.
Man, that's so rad. I'm going to do this today, and I'm just going to stick a hand in the tub then in between sets for however long and see what happens. So you said not to the point where you're restricting vasodilation, but to the point where it's just cooling off, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it didn't have any
time or temperature
self-reports. It didn't have any self-reports from the athletes themselves. Like it didn't have a statement saying, my hand felt frozen in between sets.
Right.
But the way that it was described, the study makes it sound like you want the temperature of your hands, of your single hand, to be cool, but not cold to the point where you get the feeling of sticking your hand in a bucket of ice and you take it out and it's kind of like slow motion. Or, something I'm familiar with is getting out of an ice bath in the training room in college and then going to text someone and it takes you 4 minutes to type one word because you're waiting for the... So you wouldn't want it to be that extent, but you would want it to feel cold to the point where all your muscles are still functioning, you still go fast twitch. It's not like this delayed cold response. So there's also a treadmill study that I think would also be great to go through, and this is all on the same website. I'll link it again too. This especially made me think of you because of the endurance aspect for Spartan races. And so this is a direct quote from the study. It says, "This study was designed to determine if cooling of the palm under slight negative pressure increased the duration of activity under a constant workload. For example, running."
What is slight negative pressure? Sorry, what does that mean?
I'm not sure what they mean by slight negative pressure. If I had to guess, and I'll double check this for yourself if you're
yeah.
listening to this, to go back through the study. Slight negative pressure, from what I understand, is the palm is like you're not actively pressuring the palm onto the cooling device. Your hands like kind of floating on it, like you're not really pressing down on it. Like you might be in the vicinity of the cooling device, or it might just be touching on it.
Okay, cool.
So 8 subjects were asked to walk on a treadmill moving at 5.46 kilometers per hour and at a 9% incline at an ambient temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. So it's actually pretty hot. I think 40 degrees Celsius is, let's see right here.
So that's 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was at 3.9 miles an hour. So they're cooking. They're moving.
Yeah, they're cooking, literally. Each subject was tested with and without cooling with a slight negative pressure. Body temperature was measured using an esophageal probe. The test was terminated when the subjects achieved 90% of predicted maximum output. Body temperature rise was slowed in individuals with both palm cooling and negative pressure. So again, it sounds like placing your hand on a cooling device, but you're not pressing on it. The heart rate rose in direct correlation to body temperature. Individuals with both cooling and negative pressure extended their period of activity by remaining on the treadmill 25% longer, an indication that endurance can be enhanced through cooling during exercise. And that goes back to the statement by Andrew Huberman, where he says temperature is the most powerful variable for improving physical performance and recovery. I'd argue it's even more important than sleep. And so I can't speak for Dr. Huberman, but what I take that to mean is that if you had a choice between getting to leverage temperature during something like a Spartan race or getting a full night's sleep, I imagine he would choose, based on his statement, being able to have a device kind of like this in the study to prolong the physical activity. And he would choose that above getting a full night's sleep itself. Again, don't want to speak for him, but relating it to the Spartan race and to what you do, to what you compete in, it's fucking wild.
Yeah, that's wild. And it's interesting too, because I've was thinking while you were talking about this, about during runs or whatever, throwing the water on the face always feels great. But I go, especially during Spartan races, I try very hard not to get my hands wet. Right, because I want to have like good grip and everything. I don't want to be slipping off of this or sliding off of that. But having a way, maybe at water stations, or maybe even just like taking that water cup, throwing it on my face, dumping it on my hands. Right, maybe that's the beneficial thing to do in that scenario, slowing me down or to cool me down rather. Right, so that's just an interesting thought and something to think about moving forward.
Should be good.
Yeah.
It you alluded to it where your initial reaction is to not get your hands wet. My initial reaction to feel better is to put a cold towel on your neck, like most human beings. And so some of this involves you going against your body's normal response, or kind of the mainstream response of cooling yourself. And as I said before, the Stanford lab is studying this with recreational athletes, so this could apply to you. They refer to it as Cool Mitt technology, and there's a website I'll link as well where you can kind of look at some of the actual applications and what it looks like in the study and what it may look like as a commercially viable product. But they're using this with temperature, they're using this with UFC fighters, they're using this with endurance athletes, with runners, and they're using it with just an average Joe that works out 2-3 times a week just to see what this can do. And it makes me feel like temperature is this unexplored frontier that we may be about to enter from the standpoint of the average person. The person who's a recreational athlete or just works out because it's good for them, is not competing in a professional sport. Scientists have been studying this. I believe 2005 was the earliest date on the studies I just mentioned, but this has been something known in the scientific community for over a decade, that you can enhance performance through cooling through these pathways in the body, like the feet, like the palms of the hands, like the face. And this is the first thing I've seen, and it may be the only group of people on the planet that are trying to create a product to actually do this in a race or in a UFC ring, in a corner, you know, on an NFL sideline, being able to get back in the game or get back in the ring, run an extra 25, 30 minutes on the weekend, whatever you're trying to do. I expect this to blow up in the general population. It sounds like something that has the power to do that.
I agree. And you know, what's really interesting is one of the things that drew me to cold originally was, you know, seeing pictures of, you know, football players during training camp in cold tubs in between, you know, sessions. And there's a reason why, or one of the reasons why our special forces trains on the West Coast. This is because the, you know, Pacific is pretty cold. It gets in the high 50s, low 60s in you know, January, February, March during basic, right? And you know, there's a reason why. Like, if you go back and forth out into the cold, and you can do more, you can recover faster, right? Like, I've noticed much less inflammation in my ankles and calves, which I used to get a lot more of. You know, I've noticed a lot, you know, just so many little benefits like that from, like you said, being able to do more in these things that now are maybe more available to the average athlete or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and like we said before, we're not going to advise you to do anything. We're not going to advise you to experiment. I can tell you for myself, this is something that I'm highly interested in experimenting before a commercially viable product comes on the market, to just play around with cold and hot during a workout, or before a run, during a run, just anything I can. Like you said, putting an ice bucket in the backyard and just doing kettlebell swings and dipping your hand in ice in between sets, just like playing around and feeling the effects. And so it sounds like you are going to experiment as well. And yeah, I'm excited for the future of temperature and performance.
Agreed. I hope, brother.
So a good way to wrap up, I always like talking about life and meaning in some way, and how this can apply to the population on a broader scale, not just for you or me, but to anyone out there who's interested in leveraging this type of stuff. One of the main things I wanted to mention was that, you know, I still consider myself a beginner in heat and cold exposure. I've been doing it for about 5 years on and off, but in no way have I made it a daily part of my life yet. I am going to do that, but it started out with these small introductions into a sauna, or small introductions into pouring ice into the bathtub at my parents' house. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a Swedish sauna in a high-tech place that has a bunch of sauna and cold tubs. It doesn't have to be, you know, the perfect ice bath that you buy online. It doesn't have to be an infrared sauna, although I am going to pull the trigger on an infrared sauna for myself in Brooklyn. Like, if anything, selfishly, this podcast finalized my mind on purchasing an infrared sauna. So that will
Super
be
hell yeah,
a purchase. But it doesn't have to be. This is all shit that you can do buying an ice bag for $2 at 7-Eleven, or just going on a run on a really fucking hot day over the summer, or just staying outside for longer than normal, finding a sauna at a local gym, whatever it is. You can implement these things on a cheaper and smaller scale. It doesn't have to be all at once. You can amp it up or down depending on what is feeling good for you, what's feeling right for you. But in no way does this have to be an all or nothing thing. And sometimes I deter myself from even starting because I have this ideal of what I need, and then I can't get it. And so I delay the start of something because my reality doesn't fit that ideal. I would say with this shit, you know, fucking go buy a bag of ice, throw it in the tub, go sit outside, go fucking, you know, go ask your buddy if you can get a guest pass at his gym and go sit in the sauna for, 10 minutes. Do whatever you can do to just get started.
Take a really, really, really long, close to unbearably hot unbearably hot shower, right? And then flip that switch to as cold as it gets before it turns off, right? And that's a great, super accessible way for anybody to do this.
Yeah. And the other thing that jumped out at me as I'm going through hot and cold exposure this week is nature gave us the gift of temperature. When the Big Bang happened billions and billions and billions of years ago, and the physics of this universe were set up, there's this thing called temperature that nature regulates for us based on the laws of physics. And it is a gift. It's something that is available to us. And temperature regulation, going in a sauna, going in an ice bath, any form of hot and cold treatment, it's using the gift of nature and amplifying the effects of it and harnessing the effects, leveraging the effects of this gift through technology. And there are other things like psychedelics or like artificial intelligence that come from things that we have. And as we evolve, we learn to build better tools to harness the gifts of nature. And so that was something that was running through my mind of how many other naturally occurring phenomenon like temperature change are we not using and are we not trying to leverage, and also just being grateful that we can change our lives so quickly and in a deep fashion through something that's accessible to literally anyone that is alive and has sensation. So, almost anybody.
Yeah. I mean, damn, what a profound thought that is. I mean, that took me to the various forms of human movement. Like, what happens if we all crawled more often, right? And what happens if we all swam, right? Like I hate swimming, but humans can swim, right? And humans should be able to swim. And humans, what if I got better at swimming? Like, there'd be a huge host of positive things that happen from that, physiologically, psychologically, and otherwise, right? Like, I mean, there's just so many things that you're right, maybe we aren't experiencing or taking in. But I think when it comes to what Mother Nature has given us, when we get out in Mother Nature, when we experience nature, when we experience these very primal things like hot and cold, and, it's part of living. It's living with capital letters. That's experiencing the spectrum of human emotion and experiences. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It makes me think about the ending of Tim Ferriss's podcast where he asked the Billboard question, where every guest he has on, if you've ever listened to Tim Ferriss, you know that he'll ask the guest, if you had to put something on a billboard that everyone on the world would see, what would you throw up there? It would be a quote, would it be a picture? And I always like the answers that are more concrete, where it's not just a profound quote. It's not just something that makes you think, but it's something that gives you direction. And so if I had to give a bulletin board statement, it would probably be along the lines of giving a direction on the bulletin board for meditation and sauna. Like, if even 1% of people listen to those things, and Tim Ferriss, has 5 million people listening to an episode, he's got a fucking gigantic audience. If 1% of people that listen to that podcast downloaded their favorite meditation app, maybe I even put my free month QR code for waking up on the billboard so people could just fucking snap it and get it, and then found a way to get in a sauna or do cold therapy. That is more people walking around in the world that are a little less pissed. They're a little more energized. They're a little more grateful. And I think that is ultimately what life is all about. It's pursuing your purpose to the fullest, and then also setting the stage for other people to feel like they're in a state where they can do the same thing in their own right. So even if someone has a completely different purpose than you, what knowledge can you share? What can you say? How can you help this person more fully align with their purpose? And meditation and things that activate hormesis, sauna, cold therapy, like that falls in line with no matter what you're pursuing, no matter what your purpose is.
Yeah, 100%. And said slightly differently, it's like everybody can benefit from that. Mine would under this guise would be drink more water. Everybody, if every single person drank a little bit more water, things would be a little bit better for everybody else, right? And I think that getting in the cold, getting in the sauna, getting into nature, maybe the temperature, maybe it's go outside. Everybody got on their phone a go outside reminder right now, right? Wherever you are, whether it's cold or hot or rainy or fucking sunny, go outside. Right? Like that would be amazing for everybody. And so I think this is a really great way to kind of tie this all up because, there is sometimes the simplest things fix the biggest problems. Sometimes the simplest things fix the biggest problems. And there are so many aspects of low-hanging fruit that are available to us from a health and wellness and feeling better standpoint. And going outside, right? Experiencing some temperature extremes, being grateful, being present, drinking more water, sleeping a little bit more. Like that's it. Walk more, period. Done. Over, right? Like people are going to live better lives by doing those simple things. Love more.
Yeah. Make it easier for yourself to feel like doing the things that are good for you, to feel like you can make the right decision. Making the right decision sure is great. And, people that say get after it, and I've been in that boat many times where the directions or maybe I'm saying it to myself to just do it. When you feel more relaxed or you feel more energized or you feel you're in a state that is just alert and good to go and feeling good as a precursor to the just do it, you're much more likely, at least in my experience and your experience, to get the fuck after that thing that you need to do. And so, I think what you said is a great spot to end off. And I really fucking enjoy these segments. I enjoy talking to you as always. Again, Dave will be a regular on the Aux. We will do these once a month, get into different topics, health and wellness. For people that are listening to this, Dave, where can they check you out? What's the best place for people to reach out and keep up with all of your badass exploits?
My badass exploits can be found on the gram at Get Strapped, Stay Strapped. For Storywork, check out workyourstories.com. And there's some great links and info in both those two places. And as you said, man, I'm excited. I love doing these types of shows, man. It's super fun and excited to dig into the next topic next month.
Cheers. See you guys next time.